Far away.
I'm wondering how you yourself have utilised God in your process. When I say utilise,
Yeah, I don't utilise God, but go on.
you know, like I guess in a personal way for your own progress of how you've, in a practical sense, which may be helpful to us, you know, connected with God and.
What I want to do is present a whole series of talks about God, and present a whole series of talks about how you can personally go through the process of discovering God's nature and God's character. But to be honest, when everyone's so shut down emotionally, it's not going to be a process that you're going to find probably even worth talking about until you let yourself open up emotionally. That's the key thing. So I'd definitely like to talk about those things, yeah. For me, my entire focus is firstly on that relationship. And firstly, my entire focus is on understanding God. So my focus isn't on understanding me. That comes secondary to me. Like I come to understand me by developing this relationship where I want to understand God, and in that process God shows me a whole heap of things about me that I need to know before I can understand God. Does that make sense? So my focus isn't on God knowing me first. My focus is on me knowing God first, trying to understand God, trying to get to know God. And I know that I must receive some of God's love to understand God. I know that now, but when I began, I didn't know that necessarily. Does that make sense? When I began, it was just a desire in me to know the creator of the wonderful universe in which I was a part. And I just wanted to know the being who created all of this and who created me and and in particular I was fascinated about the being who created the emotion of love. Because it's an amazing thing, the emotion of love. It's still something that blows me away most of the time when I feel about it. You think about the very concept of creating an emotion that is completely independent of space and time. Do you know what I mean by that? Like it's not bound by distance or time or space itself. It can be felt into it. God is living outside of the universe, and yet I can feel God's love. So therefore the emotion of God's love is something that's not bound by the universe itself. It's a pretty remarkable substance or emotion that somebody created. So the whole concept that somebody created that. And not only that they created that once you receive it, that your soul has the potential to grow by receiving it. That's an amazing concept in itself, that the very substances involved in making your soul are dependent upon the flow of this love from that creator, and this love flowing into your soul will cause you to become a completely different person than you currently are. That's an incredible concept as well. And when I start thinking about those kind of things, I want to know that person who does all that, what how they feel and how they think and what kind of what caused them to come up with these concepts that are so amazingly simple but amazingly beautiful. Like what causes a person to even dream up these things, right? And what causes a person to dream up the universe in which I can play and gives me free will so that I can play even in the way that they don't want me to necessarily. Like when I say don't want me to, where they know that I can't damage anything if I do play in the way that is out of harmony with the universe itself. But they've created a self-correcting universe and a self-correcting soul and a self-correcting body. And what amazing creature is this person? What is the way they feel and think. That's been my primary focus in my entire life. And all the other things that I've discovered, all the laws I've shared with you, everything about your emotions I've shared with you, all of that comes from that relationship. I haven't gone away and tried to find out about the law of cause and effect. Right? I haven't. I've discovered the law through this relationship with finding out about the person who created it. Right? So to me, that's the most fascinating part of your development of your relationship with God. And to me, that's something that we could, honestly, we could talk about for years, for centuries. We have talked about it for 20 centuries, and still are nowhere near discovering the full extent of God's nature and personality. But of course, in that time, you do discover a lot about God's nature and personality. And for you to share that with others, the only way you can share it is, unfortunately, on this earth, the only way at the moment we can share is via words, which are terribly limiting. I was saying to Mary this morning, I always find myself terribly limited when it comes to expressing concepts in English, right? Because if we were in the spirit world, we could just project the emotion of what it all feels like, and the other person would understand. If they were in the same or similar condition, they would understand straight away and understand it and get it probably fairly quickly, right? But here on earth, you talk all these words, and somehow somebody's got to interpret everything from these words. Now, God doesn't do that with me. That's why I can understand things better from God than I can from anyone else. Because God's transmitting these emotional concepts to me. As long as I'm open, I'm understanding my emotional self and open to these emotional concepts flowing into me, they can flow into me without impediment, and then all these concepts within me start coming up as well, like understanding how everything else works. So yeah, like at this stage, the words are said that if you seek first God's kingdom, it says in the Bible, all these other things will be added to you. And the way I actually said it was, if you seek first God's love, all of these other things will be added to you, right? The reality is very few people understand that concept even. And the demonstration that we don't understand is what kind of questions we ask. Right? That's the very first time somebody has asked me that question that you've just asked, Paul, in the last 6 years. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Right? If you think about it. So yes, that's where I want to head, is discussing all of those kind of things. And one of the things that I'm doing at the moment is writing a book which sort of tries to help people connect emotionally to how I discovered the truths of the universe through this relationship with God. Does that make sense? So that's what I'm trying to do at the moment. I'm getting about 3 pages a week done at the moment, but so it's going to take a while, obviously. But I'm trying to describe in English feelings all the time, like feelings of what it's like to develop this relationship with God, and to be focused firstly on that relationship. So all I can recommend to everyone is that that's the way to go. Find out about God first. And what I would like to do is in future have a lot of discussions about how to do that. Yep. But if you're not open emotionally, there's nothing I can say. Because there's no amount of words is going to open you emotionally. There needs to be a decision that goes on inside of your soul to understand and open your emotional self and open yourself up emotionally towards God. Then you will have the ability to understand. Yeah. And even just developing a desire to do that begins the process. But you're going to have a sincere desire to do it, a sincere desire to really confront all the emotions within, to really get started on the real path with the relationship with God. So that's what I can recommend at this point. So we will have discussions, where we focus on the relationship with God, and we focus a lot of our attention on finding out from God what God is like and developing that relationship.
Yeah, your enthusiasm is awesome around this topic.
Yeah, well, it's my favourite topic. You don't get to see my favourite topic very often. Like, do you think, am I speaking about, emotions or prophecy and predictions or, lots of other things that I've spoken about in my time? Do you think all of those things have anywhere near the importance to me. They have importance to many of you, I understand. Some of you need answers to those questions sometimes to break down the errors and break down the lack of faith and start to build some faith and those kind of things. But the reality is real faith doesn't build unless the relationship with God starts anyway. So while I'm happy and I have been happy to answer all the questions I do get asked, the ones that really matter to me are these ones about God and God's nature and God's personality, God's character, the overwhelming power of God's abilities, and how you can discover and interact with all of those things. That's more important to me. Yeah.
And I guess things in the Bible which touched my heart was like, it said Jesus went away and prayed all night.
Yep. Yeah, I often pray all night.
That's huge to think that you just hung out with God all night.
Yeah. Well, why wouldn't you? Particularly once you, to me, once you become at one with God, all of the difficulties associated with the reception of truth have all been dismissed in your soul. In other words, you've got no blockages or, impediments to reception of truth. And as a result, why wouldn't you hang out? From that point on, you have a complete connection with God all the time. So why wouldn't you hang out with that connection most of the time? Of course you would, right? Everyone in the celestial spirit realm does that. It's not unique to myself. But my first feelings are, I want to discover God's nature. That's my first feelings. And all of the other things we can talk about, to me, are incidental to that underlying thing. Discovering is everything that I can possibly know about God and God's nature. And I feel the only reason why I know what I know now is because I did that. I don't see myself as any special or unique individual. The only difference between myself and most other people that I've met is they don't have as strong a desire to know God as I do. That's the only difference. But you can develop it. It's like any other desire, right? You can develop it, a desire to know God. And that desire to know God and understand God, once you develop it and once you engage it fully, you will progress very, very rapidly. You will find that you won't be slowed down by external things, external events, fears. All those things won't slow you down anywhere near as much, because the thing that's always pulling you is this desire for that relationship. Yeah. So I feel it's the most important thing you could find out about. But I'm not willing to answer questions, or I should say, I'm not willing to have discussions with other people who don't want to know about it. Because to do that would be breaking their will. At the moment, for many of you, if you're honest with yourself, your will is being exercised to not know God, but rather know yourself or know what's going on in your relationships or something like that. That's where your will has been exercised. If you think of even many of our interpersonal interactions, Paul, most of your will has been, even though you do have a fascination about God, which I feel in you quite strongly, most of your will has been engaged trying to solve other problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this, so when I interact with that, I'm like, I love you, so I want to give you what I can in supporting the direction of your will. And we've got to understand, for the majority of us, that the direction of our will hasn't been to love God or know God. It's been more about trying to resolve our personal problems and personal issues, all of our sadnesses and our fears, and allaying a lot of our problems. And that's where we've spent most of our time answering questions. And I sort of feel like, well, that's fairly normal because most of us are fairly narcissistic. We're mostly concerned about ourselves initially or our relationships initially. But once you develop your relationship with God, it's not like that anymore. Like, in my experience, I'm not focused on myself when I'm developing my relationship with God. I'm focused on, I want to know God. And in coming to know God, I'm going to have to know myself. I understand that. I'm going to have to. Like, sometimes I feel forced into it, but very rarely. Because to me it feels like, no, I have to know this. I desire to do the work I need to do to come to know God more. And I know the only way I'm going to come to know God more is by expanding my soul. And the only way I can expand my soul beyond the natural person is to receive some of God's love. So I know the importance of all of those things. Without receiving God's love, I cannot come to know God. I can guess, but I'm not going to know God's nature or personality. And so this is why it's so important to me, those subjects. But I understand why those subjects are not important to you yet, for many of you. I understand that you're more concerned about the unhappiness in your life and you're more concerned about these other things. But at this stage, many of you don't understand that if you focus your first priority on God's relationship with God, then a lot of these other things would sort themselves out really rapidly. Much more rapidly than they have been being sorted out. Much more rapidly. And that's the beauty of having that relationship. Mary?
I don't think that's a principle you've skipped over with anyone.
No, it's not a principle I've skipped over, but it is something that I haven't been able to share much information about.
It's kind of funny though, isn't it? I mean, I feel really passionately about letting people know about the possibility of God's love and sharing that. That's amazing. And hearing you talk about your relationship with God is often really inspiring. But sometimes I find it sort of humorous, if you'll humour me, because it's like we're all talking about someone and pretending they're not in the room. And do you know what I mean? It's like you and I having a conversation about Lena and Lena's qualities, and she's right there.
In regard to what? With God?
With God.
Yeah.
You know, and God's already here and we could just feel God.
Correct.
But we end up talking about God instead of just opening our heart up and feeling so,
Correct.
You know, in
Which
this
is
analogy.
the main reason why I've focused on trying to attempt to help you open your heart.
Yeah.
Now, I can't open your heart, as you know. God can't open your heart either, by the way. Do you know why? Free will, yeah. God's given you the free will. And so therefore you are the person that has to open your own heart. Which is good, isn't it? That's the way it should be. That's what it's good to be a free thinking, free feeling, sentient being, someone who has their own feelings, their own thoughts, their own emotions and so forth. And and all of that is governed around what they want to do. And this is what I'm saying to you, is it's only when you really want to get more information about God that more information about God's going to flow to you quite easily. Yeah, Paul?
And I'm wondering how to grow that,
The desire?
The desire. It's like it's like I haven't thought about God all day today, you know.
Yeah.
And then for it to be an intellectual thing and think, I want to go through, go for a walk with God and spend some time, but to somehow grow this desire. So,
okay. That's the question I was actually going to leave you with. Right? So the question that we're going to leave you with today was, I've just listed all of the things that you would do if you were emotionally involved with those particular things, being humble, wanting truth. And then in particular, we've been focusing on being loved, wanting to love God and have God's love enter us, and then wanting to love others and have others' love enter us, right? Now, that's the question, we've made the statements about what it means to be emotionally involved in that. But the real question is this: how do I develop desire to do those things? That's the real question, isn't it? Right? I think is exactly what you said is true for the majority of people, Paul. The majority of people in the course of a day do not think about God. Even when they know God exists, they don't think about God. Many of them. So the real question becomes, how do I develop a desire to do all of these things? And that's where I feel you need to do some homework. Think about how you've developed desire to do other things. Think about that. Like, how have you developed this desire to do other things? We don't want to answer the question now because I feel that's a whole separate discussion on its own. But how did you develop a desire? Like, so, Paul, you bought a property next door, right? You built on it. How did you develop a desire to do those things? Something had to have happened for you to make those decisions and choices. Huh?
Yeah, well, it's connected to other things which I love and like doing. And
Okay. But how did you develop a desire to do it? There's got to be something that...
by the action.
Yeah.
So I sort of made some calls and came out and had a look and
Yeah. Keep going.
and
Did you like think about it for 2 seconds and then say yes?
No. So it took
No?
it
What
took
did you do?
well, it took, I don't know, 8 months of thought and
Right. And I bet you thought about it pretty much every day
yeah, pretty much.
for the 8 months.
Mm.
Yeah. And you thought about how you could achieve it, what you were going to do with it, what kind of plans you had, all these different things you had. So what I'm suggesting is that's what you do with anything that you have a desire for that's physical in its nature. What I'm going to suggest to you is to work out a plan for yourself of what you're going to do in the same line of developing your relationship with God. So can you say you want to develop a relationship with God? Like you wanted to buy the property here next door, let's give an example, and you spent 8 months of thought, investigation, plans, thinking about it each day, thinking about how it was going to happen, what you were going to do, what were your future with it, all this thing. Do all of that with your relationship with God. Do all of that work. The same way you would do it with, you did it with a thing.
And like I had an end goal in sight, so I'd have an end goal in sight as well, thinking, I want to be really close here with God and receive God's love and
Yes.
give God my love.
And to me, one-ment with God isn't the goal. To me, one-ment with God is just a part of the journey that I want to. I want to know as much about God that I can start interacting with God like like I know God exists outside of the universe in which I live, but I wonder sometimes whether it might even be possible at one point in my future to actually get outside of the universe in which we live. So I don't know. I don't know whether that's possible. Do I? Like, I don't know. So I've got to expand my capacity of my imagination of what might be possible in my relationship with God. See, and then you'll want a desire to experiment with that. Just like, you phoned around with people, you talked with people about the concepts and ideas. So do that about God. Talk with people about concepts and ideas about God. What do you think God's like this? What do you think God's like that? You talk about, the person you're trying to discover more about. So this will help develop this desire for you to know. And the more the desire develops, the more open your heart becomes. And then you'll start receiving the actual knowledge from God after that point. But before that point, the desire has to develop. God knows when your desire is lukewarm, right? God knows when your desire is like, oh yeah, whatever. Oh yeah, I'd like to have a relationship with God, in amongst all the other 5,000 things I want to do. That kind of thing is the attitude most of us have. And that God knows that. And God knows that a relationship with God's not possible under those circumstances. Right? So God's waiting for our desire to grow. And you can grow your desire. Can you not? You've grown your desire for, like when you first meet a person of the opposite sex and you're a heterosexual and you're not in a relationship and you'd like to know that person more and you'd like to finish up having a relationship with them, like as soon as you meet them you go, oh, I know everything about them. I know I want a relationship with them, so I'm going to have one. Like, that's not how it works generally. What it works is you meet them, you get to know them, you spend time with them, you like the time you spend with them, so you spend more time with them, you investigate how they feel about all these different things because you're asking questions about themselves and you watch their life and observe their life and they on the other end have the same feeling for you. And so you develop a relationship and eventually this relationship develops where you're starting to know each other. Well, that relationship began with you not knowing each other. And your relationship with God begins the same place, where you don't know each other. And God wants to know you. So God's already going, I want to know you, I want to understand you, I know everything about you, I know how you were conceived, how you were born, how you've lived life, all the emotions that have entered you, all the emotions that you could be, all of the personality I designed you to be, everything. God knows everything about you. And we're just saying, like, okay, we're waiting for God to do something. God's already done everything that God can do on God's end of the relationship. The only person that we need to start to deal with is ourselves. Yeah, Paul?
But it's like to go through like the nothingness of, righto, God, I'm here and I'm ready for the info or for the feeling. And it's like...
Paul, if you're honest with yourself, if we're ready for the info, would the info already be flowing? Yes, is the answer, right?
Yeah.
Right? God loves you enough to know that if you have this open heart and you're ready to have the info flow, God's going to be making it flow already. Yeah. So if the info isn't flowing, something's going on within me.
Yeah, but it's like just spending the time to be patient and present. I'm wondering, and to be hope.
Not to be patient, not to be present, not to be hopeful, to be honest and say, okay, I know God wants. I have enough trust right now that God, because God loves, and I have that as an intellectual concept at least, I have enough trust that if God really loves, that God is already trying to give me everything that I need already. And I'm not feeling that. That's true, I'm not feeling that. So if I'm not feeling that, what's got to be going wrong? There's got to be something going on in my inner world that is causing this block between myself and God. There's got to be something wrong there. Now, the key then is being humble enough to discover what that thing is. Right? God even wants to tell you what it is. And the indication that we're not knowing what it is already an indication we're not humble enough to hear it from God. Does that make sense? Already. Because God's already trying to say, here's your next issue, here's your next issue, here's your next issue. God knows all the next issues, every single one of them. If you've got 1,000 of them, God knows every one of them and the right sequence for every one of them. Every one of these issues that you have, God knows exactly which one is the next one that's going to cause you the most benefit if you release it. He's already trying to tell you. The law of attraction is already ramped up around the issue in your life. It's just that we don't see it. Right? Now, you think about your the law of attraction and what it's brought into your life recently, and you think about the events that have occurred. You think about all of those things. What is it that God's trying to show you? It's pretty obvious, isn't it? This stuff with women is blocking me from feeling my stuff with God.
Yeah.
God's already shown you. So the key is to be humble and allow yourself to feel your way through that stuff with women. Now, up until this point, you haven't realised how important it is. Because if you had have, I'm sure you would have done something more about it than you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is the thing. If you know, Paul, you know, and I'm speaking specifically to you because I know others don't have the same desire for God that you have. You know you have a desire for God. You can feel this desire for God in you. You love talking about God. I know that it's probably the subject you'd like to talk about the most, with other people. Right? This is what drew you to becoming a, minister of religion and all those kind of things that you wanted to do. They were all driven by this desire you have for God, right? So the issue isn't the desire you have for God so much as the unwillingness to deal with certain impediments that are causing a blockage. That's an issue.
Yeah, and so it's like being honest with God and asking what is stopping me from connecting with you.
Yes.
At the moment.
And God's already giving you the answer. Remember, God is already giving you the answer. Already. Yeah. God's already giving me, you, every single person on this planet the answer to that question. Right at this moment, we are all getting the answer through all of God's laws and all of God's helpers, this in spirit world, are all trying to tell us the information we need to know. We are just resistive to it. And that's where we need to do our work. We need to find the resistance. What's the resistance? You know, so you think of what the attractions are bringing you at the moment. It's a lot about women, your willingness to pander to women, your willingness to do what women say or advise without any thought about whether it's loving or not loving, your willingness to do all of these kind of things. You know this has been a problem all through your life, and God's, through the law of attraction, showing you this is the problem. This is stopping my relationship with you, Paul, is what really God is saying.
Yeah.
And Paul's going, but I don't want that thing to be the thing I have to deal with next. I want something else. Right? And that's where we come unstuck. We come unstuck with our humility, our inability to see what God's showing us and then focusing on developing through it. So, and I always think, well, God's already trying to show me. Like at the moment, I'm a bit frustrated with myself with my own progression because I can feel God's already been trying to show me for ages what's going on now for me. And I'm obviously really resistive about this particular thing, whatever it is. So I must have a lot of fear. So I'm acknowledging there's got to be a fear. What is this fear? I'm acknowledging this. Normally, I have a breeze getting into my emotions, generally. I have a breeze getting into my emotions. The ones I'm focusing on now are emotions associated with my early childhood, and I'm having a bit of a struggle getting at them. What is the reason why? I'm shown the reason why every single day, but I'm just oblivious because I trust God enough to be showing me already. I know God's showing me, so I'm just looking around my life, and more focusing on, okay, feel some of this terror that's in me so that I can at least be open to knowing. Because it's the terror that stops me from knowing. And the greater the terror, the more the resistance to knowing. So there's got to be some terror in me at the moment about some issues that cause me to not see. And I can feel in my body where the pains are, around here and in my bowel. Feel the problems there. And I know, there's some problems there. I can feel the pain of the resistance, but I still am not getting to the emotion. So that's telling me I'm in a lot of fear. So I've been praying a lot about showing me the fear. What's the fear about? And then and because my emotions are unique because of coming back, it's not the average thing that you would come up in your life. Do you know what I mean? So I've got to be really sensitive to every little event that occurs if I'm going to see what this is all about. So last night I had a dream, and the dream, I very rarely dream, and it showed me one part of what it's about. So I go, okay, these are all ways God's trying to show me. Like, the problem isn't on God's end, ever.
I guess that's right. It's us wanting to know, wanting to see God's guidance.
Yeah. And that's where our humility comes in. Most of us haven't developed that level of humility yet. We have the opportunity to, but we haven't. Right?